Okay, good morning, everybody. We are today really looking forward to our next webinar, which is one of a series about the fiscalization in Spain. My name is Elias Brijing. Next to me.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us today in this webinar. I'm Isabel Nogales. I'm the Business Development Manager for Spain, and we are very happy to be able to do this webinar today with you.
Perfect. Before we are coming directly to today's agenda, just a couple of words, and also to maybe give all the participants enough time to join the webinar. Really happy that so many of you registered, but now are also taking their time to listen to us. And I think we are today really talking about interesting changes in Spain. We try to provide valuable information as we always do. And I also see that as a reason why so many, so we are talking about more than 50 people, are also attending today's webinar again. With no further ado, I would suggest let's go to today's agenda. What are we talking about?
Well, today we are talking about the fiscalization in the European Union and then going a bit more detail into Spain. In Spain, we are talking about TicketBAI system that is already live. We will go into detail later, as well as VeriFactu, that is a new system that was announced last year. We will also discuss the electronic invoicing because there is a lot of information that related to VeriFactu. And for the last point, we are gonna show you how we can adapt your invoicing of POS software to the new legislations.
Perfect. So today we are starting with fiscalization from a basic standpoint, and then we come directly to the situation in Spain, which is kind of special to some extent. Anyhow, actually, you don't have to worry about that because we are taking care, but that is one thing you will also see later. Pretty much what is fiscalization? Fiscalization from our perspective, and what we mean by that is the seamless recording of transactions and anti-tamper protection of transaction logs in POS systems. To put it quite short, if there is a business transaction which is recorded via a POS system, governments want to know how much there was sold so that there is no tax fraud happening actually. The requirements are pretty much set by legislation, by different governments and individual countries, or even different regions within a country, which makes it sometimes more complex for POS vendors or retailers. But this challenge for POS vendors and retailers is one key service Fiscally wants to provide to have the most seamless solution for everybody, for each business, branch and situation. Who is involved? So no matter which country we are talking about, tax agencies, so pretty much the government is one of the important stakeholders which is involved in fiscalization. Then of course, different companies, software providers, and there it kind of depends, but whoever is developing a point of sale software is affected of different fiscalization requirements. And then also, of course, the consumer to some extent, because the consumer is doing the business transaction or is at least an essential part of such business transactions. So that's pretty much the situation. And what we see in different countries is that the POS provider is one of the most essential parts, especially in the beginning, in the introduction phase of different fiscalization requirements, because they have to adapt their system to the new legislation. Next topic, fiscalization in Europe. So pretty much if you look at the fiscalization landscape in Europe and maybe also more international, a worldwide approach, you see different fiscalization requirements in different countries, which makes the situation quite challenging for POS providers, especially for international POS providers, because they have to adapt their system to all the different legislations in different countries, and maybe some fiscalization history. As a side note, Italy, for example, was the first country in the world to introduce a fiscalization legislation, and that happened in 1992. Since then, a lot more countries joined this this process, and there's also this OECD recommendation that governments should introduce fiscalization laws and requirements to prevent tax fraud. That's the ultimate goal, to prevent tax fraud and black money in the economy. Now, as said, we are coming directly to the fiscalization in Spain, and that's why ESA is more coming into play, because what's also going on at Fiscally, since we are fiscalizing more and more countries, we are also growing, we are bringing in different people, and ESA is one of the expert colleagues taking especially part of Spain at the moment. So, ESA, what is happening in Spain?
Well, thank you, Elias, for the introduction. Now that we know how it works in Europe, we'll go to a bit more in the topic into Spain. Spain wanted already for 4 or 5 years to start a system to control tax fraud. For several reasons, they don't have technological resources to start it first at a governmental level. So what will happen is that TicketBAI started first. TicketBAI is a system that is in the Basque Country. The Basque Country has some independence to create their own fiscal law. This is because in Spain we have 5 different tax offices, tax agencies. 3 of them are located in the Basque Country. One is the one for the whole state, and one in Navarra. So TicketBAI started in 2016. They start to discuss how can we avoid a tax fraud. So they look into different systems in Europe. One of the reference actually was Germany, Austria, France, how they are doing things to control tax evasion. And they came up with this system called TicketBAI, that in Euskera would be the Basque language, means ticket yes, as an answer to the classical question in hospitality, that is, do you want the ticket or do you need the ticket? Well, yes, you need it, because if not, we don't know if taxes are declared. So TicketBAI is already in place. It started in discussion in 2016, but it's becoming mandatory from last year. We are gonna go into more details later. And this is the part of the Basque Country. Then we move to VeriFactu. VeriFactu is the new system announced by the Central Tax Agency that will affect the rest of Spain. It's very similar to TicketBAI, but with some differences that we are gonna see now also. So let's go to TicketBAI. First question is what it is. Well, this is the name of the system given by the 3 tax authorities in the Basque Country, as well as the Basque government, and aim to reduce the tax fraud. Who is affected? Everybody who carries out an economical activity and is located in the Basque Country need to comply with TicketBAI. This is a different system in Europe, where the legal address is not so important, and maybe it's the place of the store. In the case of TicketBAI, this is the thing. If you have a store or your legal address is located in the Basque Country, you need to comply with TicketBAI. A legal obligation, well, you need to use a POS software, an invoicing software that is registered in an official list of software that comply with TicketBAI. And you need to issue a QR code that contains the main information. There's linking of an invoice that we will see a bit later how it works. Let's say that we depend on 2 different systems. One is the sending the information to the tax agency. Depending on where you are located, this information will be sent to the corresponding tax agency. At the same time, you need a signature for it, and the tax agent will give you back an answer saying if they accept it or reject it, and containing a QR code and a TicketBAI code. This QR code is aimed for the end consumer, as Elias explained at the beginning, that the consumer is someone who also take part in this fiscalization process, as they can scan this code and see if this information, if this invoice was actually registered or not. So the idea of this is that maybe in the future start some kind of a lottery, so that the consumer has some kind of incentive to check if this invoice was actually communicated to the tax agency or not. Well, important things here is the penalty for the non-compliance. In Spain, well, in the Basque Country, they consider that the taxpayer, as well as the POS vendor, is equally responsible for the non-compliance of TicketBAI. So we start for 2,000 euros per non-registered transaction. Every time the tax agency detects that there is a transaction that wasn't registered, you will be fined with 2,000 euros. If this happens more often, you will be fined with 20% of your yearly turnover if the taxpayer decided to don't use a TicketBAI system at all or use it only occasionally. If this happened more than once, well, 30% of your real turnover. As you can see, this fine also started with a minimum of 20,000 euros or 30,000 euros. If the tax agency detects there was also any kind of manipulation of records or deleted, the minimum fine starts for 40,000 euros, and all parties will be fined, including the POS vendor, because they develop a system that allows this kind of manipulation. Now we go to VeriFactu. VeriFactu is a very similar system than TicketBAI, but will be applied to the rest of Spain. Who is affected? Well, every other business located in the Spanish territory, regardless of the size of the company, big, small, self-employed, professional, everybody will need to comply with VeriFactu. Although they probably start with a voluntary period, this is what we know so far, it is expected to become mandatory later when everybody gets adapted. For this, we have some legal obligation. It's already announced that you will need to use a certified point of sales. The legal requirement, though, are still pending. Last year, they published a draft where the technical requirement was announced, but we are still waiting for the confirmation of that. As the system is expected to come in place next year, and the government needs to publish everything between 9 and 12 months in advance, we probably will see the official technical requirement published before the summer.
Mm-hmm. Maybe one interruption. So of course, please also, if you have any questions, directly shoot them in this webinar, or of course also come back to us at a later moment. We are happy to answer all of them. And I would like to ask you one question. So as we saw on this slide, in the Basque area, there are 3 different regions kind of, and they all develop their own fiscalization system. And then there's VeriFactu. Why is there not one system for all over Spain?
Good question. Well, as we have 5 different tax offices, all of them can decide to work in anti-fraud matter together or separately. In these cases, they have decided to work separately. Actually, it's a good question because we have a 4th tax agency, that is Navarra, that at the beginning joined also the project of TicketBAI, but then decided to get back a bit and say, I will see if I can do something on my own. So yeah, it's a bit complicated. You don't have to worry about it because we are developing a solution that wherever your customers are located in Spain, we will make the connection with the system they need to comply. Either it's TicketBAI, it's VeriFactu, or future regional legislation. But yeah, this is the situation. It's a bit more complex than other countries. But this is what we have. TicketBAI, normally as the Basque country is smaller, the smaller the region, the easier to get a new law. So the agreement will be easier. In this case in particular, we have 3 different provinces that TicketBAI change a bit depending on the province. Not much, but there's different. Actually, the one that Vizcaya, for example, is part of a complex system called Batuz that differs a bit from the other 2. Maybe, well, today is not the idea because we want to give you a general idea of fiscalization in Spain, but we are preparing for the next one, a webinar that goes more into detail of TicketBAI and VeriFactu, the legal foundation, why is that this way. So for sure we will know more, but as Elia mentioned, every single question you have, please go to the chat and we will answer at the end of the webinar or as soon as possible.
Cool, perfect. Next slide.
Yeah, well, as said, VeriFactu did not publish the technical requirements, but they did publish the penalty. In this case, I think it's worth noting that the taxpayer faced lower fines than the software development or distribution company. So the taxpayer can face 50,000 euros of fine per year that they don't use that VeriFactu compliance system. But the software development, the distribution, the people who commercialize it, everyone who was involved in the sales of a software that does not comply with TicketBAI, can face 150,000 euros per year. So as you can see, fines are quite relevant in Spain, and it's better to be up to date with legislation.
Cool.
And now let's go to the timeline. Well, in 2020, started a voluntary period in Vizcaya and as well as in Gipuzkoa. They postponed it 1 year because of the COVID situation. The government understand that it wasn't a good year to make changes and to make the taxpayer, let's say, bear with a new investment. So they postponed it for 1 year. So the last province started to have a mandatory TicketBAI system by 2022. In 2023, we are having a gradual implementation of the other 2 regions. That will be Gipuzkoa, that will be mandatory for the beginning of this summer, and the last one, Vizcaya, will be mandatory for the beginning of 2024. It's the same date we are expecting to have VeriFactu, although we know that probably it's going to be delayed a couple of months. So regulation, yes, it's very important because there's a lot of misinformation between VeriFactu and e-invoice. There are different things, and here is some of the different. Well, the status TicketBAI is already confirmed, it's already in place, and in 2 of the provinces is mandatory. 1 is still pending, so there is a process of implementation. When we go to VeriFactu, we see that the draft of the technical requirement is there. It was approved. It's announced that it's going to be in place, but this is still pending. The same way with the e-invoice. The law was approved, but we are waiting for the technical requirement. In the territory, TicketBAI applies only to companies that are located, the legal address is located in the Basque Country. VeriFactu will apply to the rest of Spain, and e-invoice to the whole country. The authority is different because in TicketBAI, they were driven by the 3 tax agencies of the Basque Country. The National Tax Agency announced VeriFactu, but the e-invoice law is something coming from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Digital Transformation. Also, the scope is different. As well as TicketBAI and VeriFactu aim to reduce tax fraud, e-invoice is something that is aiming to avoid late payment, to kind of help a small company that maybe can have to deal with a late payment of big companies. It's aiming only to B2B, while TicketBAI and VeriFactu are B2B as well as B2C. And e-invoice will start affecting companies in the first year with a turnover that is higher than 8 million euros per year. And 1 year later, it will apply also to companies that have less of 8 million euros of turnover. This is something that in VeriFactu or TicketBAI didn't happen. Regardless of the amount that you invoice every year, you need to comply with this both system. In any case, as mentioned, we are going to go into more details in the next webinar, so we can have a better picture of these 3 systems.
Cool, perfect. And now, maybe to sum it up already, there are different fiscalization systems and requirements within Spain, and taxpayers, merchants, and also POS providers have to adapt to all the different requirements pretty much. But as we already mentioned, our system is taking care of all the different fiscalization requirements in Spain with just 1 solution. And now what we are also really proud of, the solution is already certified for the Basque area at the moment, because what Isa also mentioned, that for the rest of Spain or the big part of Spain, the VeriFactu system is not officially in place, but the requirements are already known. Is that how you would also sum it up?
Yes, in the Basque Country, everything is already solid. That's the reason why we are certified in the 3 provinces of the Basque Country. And for VeriFactu, we are still pending the official technical requirement, although we are in contact with the tax agency from Spain. We're keeping up to date. And as soon as they are published or confirmed, the one that are in the draft, we also will include VeriFactu in our solution.
Perfect. So that means as soon as the certification also for the bigger part of Spain is possible, we will of course get it. For all the regions where it is already possible, we are a certified provider with our solution already. And that brings me actually to Fiscally in itself and our mission. Maybe, as a lot of you know, we already provide a solution, a fiscalization solution for Germany and Austria. We are founded in 2019 and are especially in Germany and the DACH region the #1 cloud fiscalization provider. And that is one important core value of Fiscally in itself. If we are talking about a solution for a fiscalization regime or requirement or country, we are always talking about a cloud software-based solution in the most seamless and easiest to use way for our partners. At the moment, we have 6 solutions in our portfolio. We are talking about different fiscalization solutions, but also one part which is important and one of the focus topics for us, the digital receipt. If you're interested, please reach out. Our product on that side is also really sophisticated. If you look at different providers, we have partnerships with different banks. So really, we are really moving forward on each and every level, from consumer to partners, POS providers, retailers, merchants, but also then other partners like banks or different wallet integrations. And the last KPI maybe we are proud to mention is that we already have more than 600,000 POSs under contract, and Spain is one addition where we really want to have a large footprint. Okay, now handing over to you again to kind of also talk about the values and the core aspects of our Spanish solution.
Well, what we want to make with our solution is to make it as easy as possible. So with one single API, you will be up to date with multiple legislation. At the moment, we have TicketBAI in place. As soon as VeriFactu, the last technical requirement published, we will also include a compliance with VeriFactu, as well as electronic invoicing. In future regulation, and there is still one tax agency that didn't create their own legislation, will create one, we will also add it. So you don't have to worry about any further formalities. As soon as you integrate our API, you will be automatically compliant with all the systems. We have also included a validation system. So in order to avoid any rejected files from the tax agencies in the Basque Country, we have created a validation system that avoid errors and therefore that the files are rejected from the tax agencies. Every future update, maintenance, is everything included. You know how we work on Fiscally, completely free of charge. And you can test our solution, get familiar with our system without signing any contract, as well as we offer you support from our team in many different languages every time you need it. And now we are coming from your questions.
That sounds like an amazing solution. Okay, so now let's see at all the questions. Just a sec. Okay, I think that's a really interesting question also for us. We're happy to answer. So what do I do when I already use a Fiscally solution in another country?
Well, this is a very good question, and we are happy to say that we are creating also a guide that if you are using our German solution and now want to use also our solution from Spain, we will send you a guide with similarities and difference between both systems to make the integration as easier and faster as possible.
Maybe one essential part of the different solutions to consider. So most or big parts of our different solutions for different countries are exactly the same, but yes, there are some country specific requirements. But especially Spain, I think if you already have a solution like Germany in place, it's quite easy to integrate and get going. Cool. Next question. So maybe to put it in my words, it's a long question, but to sum it up, so we are talking about different regions and different fiscalization requirements within Spain. How do we know which fiscalization requirements is active for the taxpayer or for the POS provider? How do we differentiate?
There we have a place. So where your legal address is located, there is the fiscalization system you need to comply with. Let's give an example. If you are a company that is located in Madrid and you have some stores in the Basque Country, you don't need to comply with TicketBAI, you will need to comply with VeriFactu because Madrid will be under the VeriFactu system. The other way around, if your legal address is located in the Basque Country in Bilbao and you have stores in Malaga and Sevilla, you will need to comply with TicketBAI, yes, even though you are maybe having a store and issuing a ticket in another city like Sevilla, this ticket needs to comply with TicketBAI because your legal address is located to TicketBAI. Therefore, you need to report every single transaction you made to the tax authority in the Basque Country.
Mm-hmm. And by the legal address, we're talking about the legal address of the taxpayer.
Exactly,
right?
of the taxpayer.
Perfect. Cool. Next question is about what happens if I lose the internet connection?
It's a very good question. You don't have to worry. You are compliant also when you don't have internet connection. We have considered this case, and in our solution it's included. In the next webinar, we will go into more details of how we cover this topic. But yeah, you are compliant also without internet connection with our solution.
Perfect. So we now maybe have to say sorry because we can't answer all your questions, but of course we are coming back also after the webinar. But I would suggest that we answer maybe one or a second question more. So how many different regulations are there in Spain now?
Affecting fiscalization, we have two. We are expecting the third one in Navarra and maybe some for the Canary as well. But in the moment we have two.
Cool. And the last one, maybe, how long is our certification valid in Spain?
Forever at the moment. So we don't have a time limit. You can use our solution and there is not set any kind of restriction that is only valid for the next 5 years or 10 years. We will be up to date with everything. If they change some requirement, we will adapt it so that you are always compliant.
Okay. Cool. So maybe my last statement. So as we have seen, there are different regions where fiscalization requirements are actually now active already. Mm-hmm. So I would also like you, if you don't have a solution at the moment, let's have a conversation because you should have actually. And yes, I really like that our solution is one single API for the different legislations. Actually, I think that's also one USB of our solution, what we see at the moment in the market. So actually, thanks also to our development team, because as we know, they're putting quite some effort in such an easy to use solution, which is quite complex in the background, but that shouldn't affect you. My last sentence, thank you for your time and for your participation, and I'm looking forward to the next one actually.
We are going to host it next month. We will know more in our newsletter. But yeah, thank you for everybody who was attending our webinar. As Elias already mentioned, if something wasn't answered during this webinar, feel free to write us. We will answer you as soon as possible, and hopefully see you in the next webinar.
Perfect. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.